Well, with everything that's going on, you might think Republicans and Democrats can't agree on anything. But both presidential candidates, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, said earlier this week, no tax on tips. That would mean not only restaurant workers, but those at car washes, nail salons, parking attendants, that they don't have to pay tax on what you tip them. Nina, is this a good idea?
Well, it sort of depends. There's the possibility for it to be a good idea, but both of those candidates offered this off the cuff. It was just sort of, a spur of the moment thing. One might even say gimmicky. And so as a result, there are quite a few questions that remain, such as why only tip service workers and not other, for example, manufacturer workers, janitors, other low-income workers, millions of low-income workers that could also benefit from some sort of tax relief. And then secondly, which taxes are we talking about? Are we talking about income taxes, payroll taxes that cover Medicare and Social Security? And then the most important question, I think, is where are we going to make up for the lost revenues, which is estimated to be somewhere between $150 billion to $200 billion? And given the fact that we are facing historic debt and also an annual deficit that seems to be never ending, these are key questions. But I think this was political because both offered these proposals in Nevada, which has the highest concentration of tipped workers, but also is a swing state.
Anirban, political, gimmicky?
There are different opinions about this, right? So let me get to the crux of it. I think a labor system where the livelihood of someone depends upon the magnanimity of a stranger is horribly regressive and backwards. So when we talk about a minimum wage, we acknowledge that the minimum is that it allows you a minimum human dignity. These service workers, and many of them, and yeah, you're right, we don't tip bus drivers, we don't tip EMT people, right? So not all tips are made equal. People who work in the background, in the kitchen and all, they don't get as much as tips. But if we are saying that minimum wage is a human wage, then paying anything below that, right, is subhuman, right? So my thing is that we are barking the wrong tree. The question is what the fair wage, the one fair wage, and other civil society groups have worked on, increase the sub-minimum wage to a livable wage.
So we should say that many of these workers don't get minimum wage. They get a sub-minimum wage.
Sub-minimum wage in upstate New York, it's $10 an hour. $10 an hour. What do you do with $10 an hour?
So you're saying better yet to raise the minimum wage?
15. To raise it to 15 and make it as a minimum wage. And the tips can go. And people generally don't report their tips, but there's a lopside to that. If you don't report your tips and then you have an injury or something, then your disability would be calculated on your income. So there's an incentive built in to actually, tell how much tips you got. So that's my opinion. I think it's a regressive system. We should get rid of it.
Nina said there may be some good reasons for this. I don't know of any. I would add, though, to
Not
the
yet.
negatives that she mentioned. First, many tip earners are very low income, and so they don't even pay any federal income tax as it is, so this proposal will not help them at all. Second, this narrows the tax base, and so the more things you take out of what is taxable, the higher the tax rate has to be on what's left. And so given that we have a deficit, given that we have all these problems, this is not a way to deal with these issues.
Well, I think it's bad policy, but good politics. And I'm glad to see the Democrats trying to do something that makes workers and lower socioeconomic feel that they feel what they're going through. So I think that Nevada's 6 electoral votes is worth it to talk about no tax on tips. The Republicans are doing it. I don't think it's going to be seen as a policy. I think it's a feeling that the Democrats have, and for that, good politics in an election year as important as this is worth saying bad policy.
But
yeah, I would agree with you, Ty. I think that is definitely, it's politics and arguably good politics, as you said. It could be good policy provided that it is structured in a way that takes into account the sorts of concerns that we're talking about. Perhaps another that we haven't mentioned just yet is the possibility that employers could reclassify wages as income, which would worsen the problem that Anirban talked about in terms of minimizing the amount of not only unemployment returns, but also simply retirement, Social Security.
Plus, there are many tip earners, those at high-end restaurants that earn, $100,000 more a year. Why should they not have to pay tax on their income when someone who works in child daycare or other low income doesn't? And again, I agree. I think this is easy to manipulate, and you're going to have high earner people try to reclassify their salary as tips.
Anirban, wouldn't this end up making it such that I, as a customer, is going to pay more because the small businesses, if they're having to pay this higher minimum wage, are going to have to raise prices?
Yes and no. I think increasing it to minimum wage is important for equity reasons, right? We know from various studies that tipped workers are sexually harassed constantly. They're asked to provide a certain kind of affective labor that we call in Marxist literature, which is the labor of smiling at you and kind of being very nice, coyingly polite to you. I'm always surprised when I eat in other parts of the world versus when I eat in US. I feel that the waiters are degrading themselves in a certain way that is only understandable if you're coming from a very different culture where people don't do that, right? They don't assault you or tell horrible things to you. They give you your food and then don't tell you how of an amazing choice you made and how great that choice changed his life and how he and his grandmother loves it. They don't do that. So that affective labor and all that comes with this incentive of tip